Today I'd like to talk about work. While working on this presentation, I realized that my work is about work. I studied industrial design at the North Carolina State University College of Design. And by the time that I graduated, the last thing that I wanted to do was design the next widget. I didn't even look for a design job. Instead, I got a job working in the production facility of an online art retailer. It was my job to operate a semi-automated double miter chop saw for 8 hours a day from 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. I cut long pieces of metal into short pieces of metal. It sounds way more exciting than it really was. Now, this is probably the best job I could have gotten, not because it was fulfilling, because it wasn't, not because it paid well, because it didn't, and not because I met my community, because I didn't. It was probably the best job I could have gotten because I learned one important thing that in the 4 years of design school I hadn't learned. If you're going to design something and have it manufactured, people are going to be there making it. I also met people who saw work as a way to provide for their family. They didn't care that they were being tracked in terms of quality and quantity, because for them it was a way to provide for their family. I met people who saw work as a means to an end. They would show up, do the work, go home, and the job allowed them to do the things they would want to do when they weren't working. But for me, it was the best job because I learned that if I was going to design something, I had to start to take into account the people. And if I was going to design something that was really successful and lots of people wanted it, it meant a lot of people were going to spend some part of their life on this planet making it. Now, the job cutting metal frames was pretty tame and comfortable compared to other manufacturing jobs around the world. But it was enough to change how I thought about design and manufacturing. Today, I consider myself a designer maker. And I've been fortunate enough to use my skills as a designer maker to make my own furniture, to make 250 feet of custom guardrail for a $5 million house in the hills of Austin, Texas. I've made vanities and custom furniture and kitchens for condos here in Philadelphia. I've made a table that became the centerpiece for an annual Thanksgiving feast. I made tables that my cats just really love to destroy. I've made quilts. I've worked with students to help make their ideas physical. I've worked with local teens to teach them how to use tools to make their own rainwater collection. I've knitted scarves that keep my friends and family warm. I've installed a knit lab and knitted a scarf for a synagogue. I most recently knitted a pavilion and worked with other students to help make it as well. And I've worked with local designers to turn their ideas into finished goods. Now, it's only been the past couple years that I considered myself a designer maker. Before that, I was either a designer or a craftsperson. When I got introduced to knitting machines, this all changed. I was instantly obsessed with the technology. I started researching what it was and who used it. I learned that the equipment exists on a domestic scale and on a commercial scale. And before I got introduced to the machinery, I was already interested in promoting local manufacturing. It was through the knitting machine technology that I started to really understand the possibilities of what local manufacturing could do. I became even more obsessed. I learned the machines. I traveled overseas to go learn from one of the companies that manufactures them. I started to learn who's using them and why, and I found out that on the domestic side, mostly women over 40 are using the machines to make things for themselves and their family. I learned that the knitting machine was first invented in 1865, and the domestic machine was first introduced in the 1950s. And so the more I worked with the more I learned about the technology, the more I worked, the more I wanted to make this part of my daily life. I really wanted to own a factory. Nobody really ever says, I want to own a factory, but I was saying that. And so to me, a factory consisted of employing a workforce, buying industrial equipment, outfitting a space. And it was through this process that I actually started to really understand that you can't have a factory in a bubble, that you have to actually have a factory as part of an industry. And so I started to realize that an industry actually consists of all the steps that go from refining raw materials into finished goods. It also includes the companies that make machines for the other companies. It includes education, it includes workforce training, it includes continuous knowledge development. It includes infrastructure, both social infrastructure and technologically. It includes all the retail outlets and all the consumers. I started to realize that just like a child, it takes a village to raise an industry. So luckily for me, I didn't have $500,000 to invest in a factory. And because of my previous background, I didn't have business experience, and nobody was lining up to lend me the money either. So I say I'm lucky in that fact because it forced me to get creative, and it forced me to sort of keep moving. I started to explore other business plans to maybe start a school of knitting. I tried to think about, well, could we take the CSA model and apply it to manufacturing? Could I partner with a local university? Could I partner with one of the companies that makes the technology? And after 2 years of this planning and learning and crunching numbers, I just sort of decided to put all the planning on the shelf and do the work. I decided to use my abilities as a machine knitter and a designer to get to work. So I started connecting to other designers. I started working on my own designs. And I started to work in public spaces, tried to connect to more people, tried to share my experiences as a maker. And what I was doing was I was taking what I could do and what I had and connecting it to other people and to what they had and what they could do. It was through this experience of working next to people that I got to this idea of community-centered industry. Now, like a lot of people, I was searching for community. I wanted to be part of a community. I sort of understood that as individuals that were connected through work, life, or play. And while I was doing all this really hard work to build industry, I sort of accidentally found myself being part of a community. And the more I thought about this, the more I realized that a community and industry are very similar. It could actually be one and the same. I started to realize that both community and industry are able to achieve a lot more as a whole than any of the individuals. They tend to work best if you adopt the idea that if you succeed, I succeed. And you start to realize that people live in a community and work in an industry all to get their needs met. And so I had this aha moment that, you know what, maybe industry can build community and then community can build industry and so on and so forth. And so this has sort of become my new focal point, my sort of way to frame what it is I'm doing and why. Now, as a maker, all my work has been meaningful, fulfilling, and rewarding in some way, shape, or form. It hasn't always gone as planned. It's been really frustrating at times, and sometimes I want to throw the whole thing out the window. But that's what makes it worth doing again. One of the biggest reasons I continue to be a designer maker is because I get to contribute to other people. Some people that are friends and family, and some that are complete strangers. It also helps me understand my place in the world. As a designer and a maker, you can't not go through the world seeing opportunities to redesign things and remake things. And I get to have fun. I can actually say that I have fun working. And I want to share that. I want other people to experience what I experience. I don't want to sort of be the only one doing this. I want to figure out ways to get more people to be designer makers. And I think it's really sad that more people aren't involved in the making of our spaces and our objects. I've been trying to think of more sophisticated or intellectual ways of saying sad, and other than just sort of adding a bunch of expletives in front of sad, that's sort of where I keep coming back to. That's what I think and that's what I feel. And I don't think I'm special. I don't think I qualify as an outlier. I was fortunate enough in high school to take classes in technical drawing and AutoCAD. And what these classes did more than any other class was it taught me a skill. I learned to try and fail and try again. And through the act of trying and failing and trying again, you can become skilled. And so I took this process of learning, try and try again, and started just picking up more and more skills. And I really believe that everybody can pick up a skill. I think everybody really can become a skilled maker. And I think everybody can become a skilled maker and participate in a community-centered industry. Now, the truth is that if we take a long view on human history, the act of making used to be something shared by the entire community. The knowledge of what to make and how to make was passed down from one generation to the next within one population. It's only been in a short amount of time that this has all changed. And what's happened is that we've taken something that's very human, the act of making something, and segregated it to a small percentage of the population. And not only have we taken making and segregated it to a small percentage of the population, we've turned making into drudgery, into work that's potentially painful both mentally and physically. What I want to point out is I want to be completely transparent and say that I completely understand that my worldview is completely filtered through the act of making. And I'm not the only one who thinks this way. There are a lot of other people having the same conversation. There are a lot of other people out there who are sad and depressed and think it's really fucked up that the systems of manufacturing exist the way that they do. And so recently, I was thinking about this, and I started thinking about robots. So robots have become a part of the manufacturing system today. And I started to think, well, what does the robot get out of it? What does the robot get out of manufacturing? Because as a maker, I can tell you what I get out of it. I get to expand my understanding of the built environment. I get to learn how to solve problems. I get to contribute to friends and family. I get to be fulfilled and have meaningful work. I get to acknowledge that I'm part of the world. I get to make money. I get to have fun. I get to experience a sense of accomplishment. I get to shape the world around me. And the robot doesn't get any of that. Now, we understand that the people who own the robot are getting some return on their investment because that robot is cheaper than the human. But what about all the other things that we could possibly get out of being makers? Is it possible to have everybody participate in that? And myself and others are working towards this. Now, I'm not a technophobe, And I don't really think that we should just put humans back in place of the robots. And I don't think that we should just shun all digital and just go handmade. And I don't think the solution is just giving everybody the making technology to have in their homes. I think community-centered industry isn't about finding a magic bullet. There's not going to be one solution for everything. I think it is going to happen, though, through changing the conversation, trying to talk about what it is we make and how we make it, and talking about what's appropriate and how do we evaluate what's appropriate. And ultimately, community-centered industry is going to come about by doing the work to make it happen. Now, I've been fortunate enough in the past years to meet people, both here in Philadelphia and outside, who have been doing this rebuilding of industry and manufacturing much longer than I have. And they've had a big influence on what I think and how I think. Reload Bags here in Philadelphia is a good example, the one that I've learned a lot from. So Roland was a bike messenger, and he was looking around on the market for messenger bags, and he didn't really like anything that was on the market. So he, like a lot of people in Philly who are makers, decided to make it themselves. But he didn't know how to sew, so we got a friend to teach him, and he made one. And he used the bag. He used it, he made it, he used it. And other messengers saw it, and they really liked it. And so they asked for one, and they paid for him to make one, and then it happened again and again. And this happened not just here in Philadelphia, but it happened all over the world. And 15 years later, they're still at it. They're still sort of one of the leading bike messenger bags in the country. Raleigh Denim in Raleigh, North Carolina is another example. Victor and Sarah decided that they wanted to make jeans in such a way that reflected their culture and their values. So they designed the jeans. They employed a workforce of really highly skilled cutters and sewers. They sourced denim from a factory that had been making denim since 1891. And 7 years later, they're still highly successful, and they've become a really great model of how to build new industry. And there's Fabric Horse and Norman Porter also here in Philadelphia, and there's Flint and Tender and Giant American all doing the same sort of work. And there's companies that have been doing this for decades and even centuries here in Philadelphia as well. Langhorne Carpet Mill, Churchville Fabrics, Wayne Mills, Huntington Winding and Dyeing, just a few that long ago adopted positive ways of working and positive ways of manufacturing. And what's happening is that these old companies are connecting to us, the new companies, and they're teaching us how to work and what the possibilities are. And the good news is these new companies are popping up slowly but surely. And it's interesting, if you take the time to really read their stories and read their motivations as to why they're doing what they're doing, there's some shared elements. They talk about the value of quality and durability. They talk about the value of the people and the importance of the work that they're doing. They talk about sourcing the best materials and linking to the best suppliers, and how the best materials and suppliers lead to the best products and therefore the best consumers. They all talk about their work in different ways, but ultimately they're talking about building industry by making connections and supporting others. And unlike a lot of other companies that are saying you can't do it because it's too expensive or just not possible, they're actually using those values and turning them into opportunities. They're using their values and their motivation to work as makers to tell them what the best way to work is. And ultimately, I think what's most exciting too about these companies is they're actually dedicating their life and their work to the act of making. They're not just trying to change it, they're saying, I'm going to spend my time on this planet being a maker. Unfortunately, these companies are a very small percentage of the world of manufacturing today. So today I want to kind of leave you with some what ifs. So what if community industry became the standard? What if the knitting industry grew next to the cut and sew industry, next to the woodworking and metal industries, next to ceramics and glass and so on? What happens when all these start to intertwine and new industries emerge? What if community-centered industry took on characteristics of the people? What if Philadelphia was made of communities where people love to work? What if the objects and buildings that surround us were made to the highest level of craft and care? What if you knew the people who made your surroundings? What if you helped make them? What if community-centered industry could provide a place for all of us to work? Thank you.